Hello, everybody. This is the Folk Music Educator Podcast. My name is Phil Kramer.
And I'm Erin May. It's great to see everyone,
It's great to see everyone. If this
or
is your
be in
first,
your ears, or
exactly.
whatever.
If this is your first time kind of tuning in and chatting with us, hi, it's nice to meet you. We are two folk music educators. I teach clawhammer banjo, mandolin, fiddle, guitar, all that good stuff. And Erin is a wonderful mountain dulcimer player. You call it mountain dulcimer, right? Am I
I
crazy?
call it mountain dulcimer. That's right.
That's
It
what I
could be
thought.
lap dulcimer, Appalachian dulcimer.
Ooh, I
Yeah,
haven't heard of lap dulcimer. That's a new one.
lap dulcimer. Yeah, the
Ooh,
one that sits in your lap.
I like that. I like that a bit. Well, yeah, so Erin has been an international traveler for the last couple of months, and that's why we haven't had an opportunity to really record podcasts or anything yet.
Yes, checking it has been a little bit more difficult.
And the few times that we have gotten on a Zoom call, it just turns into a catch up where we just talk,
It's true.
talk
It's true because
just
we are actually friends, not
yeah,
just podcast people.
exactly. We actually enjoy each other's company. So
Indeed.
yeah. So tell me about your experience so far. What have you been up to?
Well, I spent most of May in England, and that was all a very peoply connection part. So I came overseas to the UK in order to teach at a Dulcimer Week camp at Halsey Manor in the southern part of England. Um, and so I did that, but I came a couple weeks before that and spent time in England. And then I've been in Inverness, Scotland as my home base for the month of June. Um, and no particular reason for choosing Inverness, just my husband and I had done a little like drive around the UK, and we both really liked Scotland and wanted to just see if we would like it if we were here for longer than 3 days. And the answer is yes, we like it very much. I have loved Inverness. Granted, we've been here in the summer, and they tell us the weather has been unseasonably warm and beautiful and sunny, and not to expect it to always be like that in Scotland, but it's been really, really nice. And there's lots of music happening here. I've been able to connect with a lot of local musicians, and I just kind of carry my dulcimer around with me everywhere I go because I'm that kind of like nerdy person. But sometimes when I carry my dulcimer around everywhere I go, it just elicits blank stares, and I carry it around and don't ever play it. And here I've carried my dulcimer around, and as soon as people see I'm carrying an instrument, they're like, "You've got an instrument? What do you play? Do you want to join us? Do you want to join in and play along?" And I'm like, "It's a mountain dulcimer." And they're like, either, "Oh, cool, I've never heard of that. Please play it for me." Or, "That's awesome. I'd love to play with a mountain dulcimer. Get it out." So I've gotten to play a lot of music here, and I don't know Scottish music really. So I'm just kind of jumping in and doing my best and trying to learn as I go and decide how many Scottish tune books I'm gonna bring home with me at the end.
I was seeing your post on that. I was like, oh man, she's gonna end up getting a whole separate bag just for the books.
I know, I walked into the music store and I was like, "I'm only gonna buy one book. I'm only gonna buy one book. I'm gonna take pictures of some other books." I walked out with two books. One was a song book and one was a tune book. And now I'm like, so I think I want to go back to the music store. I need some more books. And, it will never be easier to get Scottish tune books than while I'm in Scotland. So
Oh
I
yeah,
can
exactly.
justify that, right?
I love it. I can't remember what festival it was growing up, but I was at this bluegrass festival and they had all the typical stuff, right? They had all merchandise wise. They had the merch tent and they had all of the little vendor tents of different things, instruments, vinyl, all that kind of stuff. But one that I thought was brilliant is there was a packing company set up with a tent.
Nice.
And they go, bring us whatever you got. If you bought jewelry, if you bought posters, if you brought CDs, whatever, we will pack it up right here. We will put it in that U-Haul right there, and we will ship it to you so you don't have to worry about it getting crushed on your way home.
That is fantastic.
I think it
What?
is utterly brilliant.
Indeed.
I
Yes.
and so yeah, I've always I love the creativity of people and all that good stuff. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad that it's been a great trip for you so far.
And I will also say that, like, I set out with this goal of basically May being off from trying to teach because
Yeah,
in May I stayed with different people kind of every 2 or 3 days, moved to a different place, and everyone I stayed with was someone I had connected with via Zoom, via the internet over the last couple of years.
yeah,
Which is like this really incredible, special, magical, like bringing together of online and in person, and all of the people who I thought were really amazing, interesting people online also proved to be that in person, which is, there's kind of this caution on the internet of like people aren't always who they really are on the internet. And I think in the realms of social media that can be for sure very, very true. But once you start interacting with people consistently on a platform like Zoom, where you're actually kind of seeing their faces and you're seeing them regularly and you're having real time kind of conversations, I think it becomes a lot harder to hide your real self. So it's just really, I don't know, it was affirming to meet these people in real life in person and go, you really are as amazing of humans as I thought you would be just from my interactions with you online. Um,
I
so
love that.
I didn't really teach in May, but I set up my little teaching studio in the bedroom of the Airbnb for the month of June, and I've been teaching 3 days a week and then kind of exploring the rest of the time. And being able to actually do that consistently. And the first couple times I got online with students, they were like, wow, it's almost exactly the same. Like it doesn't feel like you're far away and in a foreign country. So the internet is cool. And I feel really fortunate to simultaneously be in an interesting place, learning new music and meeting new people
Yeah,
and having these like new experiences while also having this tie to regular life, which is this kind of thing on
I
Zoom.
love I love that. It reminds me of one of my favorite authors named Robin Sloan. And Robin Sloan writes he's written several different novels at this point, but they all take place in San Francisco, and they are all kind of about the juxtaposition and connection between the arts and technology and all these things. And one little
Mm.
passage in this, and they're fiction, so they're not true, they're realistic fiction. But one
Mm-hmm.
of the characters talks about how we don't really have the same brains that we had like 1,000 years ago. And one of the character goes, yes, we do. And they go, we have the same hardware, but we don't have the same software. Like the idea of
Mm.
like privacy and romance and those things, those weren't really around 1,000 years ago. And they say
Mm.
that's like Shakespeare and the way that he monologues kind of helped create the archetype in our brains for the inner monologue, at least for us Western thinkers. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and she talks
Yeah.
about how for a long time writers got the ability to help kind of update the human operating system, but now a lot of it is with technology and the fact that right now we're in two separate places in two separate rooms, but it really does feel like we're interacting, and how there are students who are very important figures in both my personal and professional life who I don't think will ever have the opportunity to ever be in the same room. Maybe not.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so the ability to think and be in two places at once and do all that stuff, it's a really exciting time. And I'm glad that we musicians get to be kind of at the like us folk musicians really get to be on the forefront of how this is going to work. And
Yeah.
it's really exciting.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which,
so tell us about your summer, Phil. What have you been working on?
oh man, okay. What have I been working on? um,
Well, I know you've been working on things.
I have been working on things. Probably the biggest thing is I am launching a group claw hammer banjo course, like a little class. And
Yay, I'm
yeah,
excited.
for folks who've been listening a while, they know you've probably heard me being really fascinated by adult education research and trying to figure out ways to kind of bridge the gap and bring that into a musical tradition of education. And I've been having a lot of
Mhm.
fun and finally decided to put my money where my mouth was and try to create a class that I think will be working. And there's a couple of things that I'm excited about it because one, it's going to be filling a hole in my offerings that I haven't really done yet. One, on a cultural level of learning things together as a group and having
Mhm.
hopefully a more communal feel to the
A
online lesson
social
development.
element.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So I'm very excited to see how that goes. But also, one thing that's been really nice is I have been really struggling to figure out ways to ethically price in a time that we have such like financial turmoil around right now where
Yeah.
everything is getting so pricey and eggs are the price that they are and so on and so forth. And like, how do I create a pricing structure that is both respectable to me and also to my students? Because I really don't feel like this should ever become the luxury of only the most privileged of us again. I know that there was a
Yeah.
time where the music lessons that we've come to know them kind of was, and we shouldn't do that anymore. I really think that I want to, and so my goal was is how can I create a system where you can get a hour-long lesson once a week for under that about that $25 under $30 price point.
Mhm.
And um this is kind of turned into the system of being able to do that. We all get to take this class of, between 5 and 8 people and work together and all that stuff. And I'm really excited. It seems that we have about 6 students so far that are going to be starting in the beginning of July. And so hopefully at the middle of August, the end of August, when we record a podcast again, I get to say it was a success, but it may
Yeah.
turn out that it didn't work out the way I thought it would.
Well, or it might be both. It might be a
Might be both.
success and not in the way that you expected, because sometimes that's what happens when we try new things.
That is my hope, and it's always a little scary, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so, yeah, that's been my biggest thing, and I have to admit, because so many folks summer is a weird time for musicians and music teachers alike,
I
and
just was reading a sort of, uh, I think it was a newsletter that I get that's sort of a creativity newsletter on my email. And it was talking about creativity sort of following the seasons. It was
mhm,
talking about like spring is sort of planting seeds and starting new projects. It's like the beginning of projects happening, and summer is this time of like growth, and you're really kind of in the messy middle sometimes, and then fall is like the harvest, and winter is this like furlough time.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I actually feel like for me often summer is the furlough time. It's
mhm,
my like bringing in my creative ideas, and it's collecting ideas, and it's different kinds of social interactions that inspire me. And it's like feeding my inner artist a lot in the summer. And then in the fall, I tend to like go, okay, I've got all these ideas that were birthed in this kind of this winter time, which is
yeah,
actually typically for me happening in the summer season. And I start all these projects in the fall. And then kind of in the winter, it's like that, like wrestling through all the which projects am I going to keep and which ones am I going to bring into the next year and which ones am I going to drop and how am I going to reorganize whatever I'm doing. And then the like beginning of the new year into that spring season for me tends to be that like just finishing whatever I've started, and then summer is this rest time again. So I was like reading her description of the like creative seasons and feeling like I just do them kind of backwards.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so I feel like summer tends to me, the actual season of summer tends to be this time of more like gathering in ideas and just
Hmm.
see
I
what happens.
I completely agree with that. Like for me, maybe it was because I was such a public school kid growing up and, went straight into college and then teaching. But like the beginning of the year doesn't feel like January to me. It feels like September or
Yeah, right.
October. Like that. You probably get to hear my dogs in the background, folks. It's great. It's great. But yeah, that time in September, October is really where I start to see, okay, what's the next chapter of everything going to be
Hmm.
feeling like? And it's funny, I've been having a very similar conversation with my students recently. I'm name dropping another book, but there's this series of books written by a author and artist named and poet Austin Kleon, and he is really created. His most famous one is Steal Like an Artist, and it's a great little these three little books: Steal Like an Artist, Show Your Work, and Keep Going, I think. And we all hear those little turns of phrases or those little stories and anecdotes about creative people where we think, oh wow, that's a great little thing, I should write that down, and then we never do.
Hmm.
Austin Kleon writes them down by the hundreds or thousands and ends up putting them into these little chapters and interspersed with this kind of overarching narrative or idea, and really good fun little reads. I pretty much just kind of keep rereading them over and over whenever I need a little bit of inspiration. They're great little comfort reads. Anyway, one of the things that he talks about is that there was the story about this famous designer who thought, why do I work for 45 or 50 years to only then retire and only have like 15 years, 15 or 20 at the end of my life?
Hmm.
And he goes, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take 5 or 6 or 7 of those years and intersperse them in the middle of my career. And so every 7 years, this designer would take a full year off, no money coming
Wow.
into the business at all. And you would think, dear listeners, that
This is
um
the demise of a business.
yes, like, okay, this is done now. People will
Yeah.
go find new clients, but this was such a sought after creative person that there was just a waiting list to come back. And what the designer realized is that during that year sabbatical, that the archetype and the tone and the structure and the deep roots, the foundation of what they were going to do in their studio for the next 7 years was kind of built within that year of rest.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
really got to build what their creative vision and everything was going to be. And not all of us are lucky enough to get to have a full year off, but I've been talking to a lot of students who are feeling guilty that they're not having a chance to practice right now, or they're needing to take some time off, and that summer
Yeah.
just feels weird. And I'm telling them, like, right now, you're not just sitting on the television watching something, you're not mindlessly scrolling. Some of us are, let's be honest, but most of them are like, I'm going out hiking. I'm going to go visit. I'm doing these things. You're going to concerts, you're going to jams, you're exploring a new place that you've moved to, you're doing all this stuff. Honestly, you're building up the the gas tank of all the things that you're going to be doing creatively for the next year. And
Yeah.
I think it's very important for us to all do that. And I encourage my students, like they will list here and they go, "Oh, I practiced for 1 or 2 nights this week." I'm like, "Well, what did you do the other nights?" "Well, I went to a festival and then I went to a museum and I saw a live show." And I'm like, all of those days I'm counting as practice
That's
because
right. That's
you,
all part of the
yeah, it's
yes.
all a part of the experience of being a creative, social, widely lived person, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too this idea that like we can work the same amount in perpetuity with no breaks is very it's very American, but it's not very accurate really.
Very puritanical.
Yeah, you know, the first year that I started doing 6 week classes, like as a regular, consistent, this is the thing I did. I
Yeah.
did a 6 week class, a 1 week break, a 6 week class, a 1 week break for the entire year. And I had no longer breaks. And fortunately for me, some of the classes were not very popular and people didn't sign up for them and I had to cancel them because I actually like really needed some breaks. And so the next
Yeah.
year I was like, okay, so I'm going to do 6 week classes and a 2 week break in between each class. So a little longer break. And I'm going to do kind of fewer classes in the summer. And that worked a little bit better. And then like last year it was like I'm going to offer almost no classes in the summer because it's just that is the time when a lot of people are more busy. Adults are more busy because either they're in the like child rearing phase and they have their children are all home under their feet and they take up more of their energy,
Yep.
or their grandparents and like that's the time the grandkids can come and spend a week or two with them, or they can like
Hmm.
go do longer things in the summer and the weather is nicer and you can actually leave your house and not worry about slipping on the ice and breaking your hip or whatever. Like the
Yeah.
reality is we need rhythms that incorporate breaks, but I also like I felt guilty about taking breaks. And even this year, you know, I planned this like no work in May, basically, except for the two festivals that I taught at. So, you know, different work. And really light June and just a much lighter schedule and a lot more days blocked off on my calendar that like I'm not teaching on Thursdays and Fridays at all. And I've had that kind of feeling of like feeling guilty for doing it. But there is kind of tied to that also this realization of how many people I know who thought, well, I'm going to travel when I retire, and then they never could. And the people who thought like I'm going to put off doing this thing that I really want to do until later, and then they never got to it. And I don't know. I think our generation, maybe more, or maybe just weird things that have happened in my own life up to this point, have just given me a sense of like, it is important to plan for the long term future. And also, I can't actually plan for or predict the long term future very well. There's a lot less certainty about like you can get to this point in your life and retire and live off of Social Security and your pension and be fine. So it's like, I don't know if retirement is even a thing that will ever exist for me. And because I love everything I do, maybe I don't want it to. Like, maybe I want to be
Hmm.
like Earl Scruggs, where he has somebody help him onto the stage, carry his banjo, hang it over his neck, and still play Foggy Mountain Breakdown like nobody's business, and then
Yep.
hand somebody his, like, I kind of want to be that.
Yep.
So if
And
I want that, then what is there to like wait for? Like I don't how can we be more intentional maybe about a life that's balanced between work and play and prioritizing the things that
I,
we want to do someday into things that we're doing sooner than later. And I say all of that and also am super mindful of the position of privilege that I am in to
yes.
be able to say all of this to you from Scotland, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's all of it, and that conversation about ethics and pricing and ethics in how we manage the resources that we have. I'm always thinking about it, and I don't think that I have figured it out by any means.
Well, and I think it's always going to be a moving goalpost a little bit. Like I talk about
Mhm.
that I love being a dog owner. I love having my big old teddy dog. And I got him when I was, gosh, 22, 23. And um the rental market, the housing market, the economy in general was so different when I got him that it was irresponsible, let's be honest, but it wasn't so irresponsible as me doing it now. Like, I talk to a lot of, like, other college kids today, and they're like, "Oh my god, I would never think about getting a dog right now." And it's like, yeah, it's a completely different world,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
but the whole discussion really reminds me of this quote that Ira Glass, came up with of don't wait until don't wait until you're older. Don't wait until you got the job that you want. Start now.
Mhm.
Ideas don't just fall into your lap. You have to go looking for them. You have to go all these things. And I love this quote. And when I first heard it, it was definitely inspiring for me. But I'm also to the point in my creativity and my professional life that I realize that we hear that idea so often and it's really annoying because some of us are like, I'm sorry, but I do have to be considerate about the job that I have and the responsibilities of my life and all these things. I can't
Mhm.
just drop everything and start doing this new thing. And, I have limited hours in the day and all these things. And so to me, there's the idea of just start and go and like learn. I think it's great. And for some people, it really resonates. But for me, a better way of thinking about it is I tell my students all the time, I don't care how you play music. I care if you play music.
Mhm.
And I think that can go for any number of things that we're really wanting to prioritize, but haven't felt like we have a chance to yet. Like I don't care if you cook I don't care how you cook your own meals. Care if you cook your own meals. I don't care how you get in your exercise. I care if you get in your exercise.
And baby steps really do get you somewhere, right? Like
Yeah.
taking a tiny step in a direction. Like I think about the journey it's been to get to this place. And it's really been years and years and years and years of taking little small steps because travel is important to me and playing music is important to me and learning about other cultures is important to me. And so over 15 years, it's been like, what's one thing I can do that gets me a little bit closer? And it's like, well, I could offer lessons on Skype, and then I could offer lessons on Zoom, and then I could make it a class on Zoom. And meanwhile, I could answer that email when somebody from a foreign country asks me a question, or I could follow up on that. Like, I had an interaction on social media that was intriguing to me, and I can actually follow it up and build it into something so that now I have a relationship with a person and not just like, oh, I would
Yeah.
like to do this thing, and I have no starting point for it. And like, it is those tiny little baby steps that get you toward like cooking your own meals or having music as a part of your daily life or traveling or whatever. Like, it often is these tiny little baby steps, and for the first, I don't know, 100 tiny little baby steps, you feel like all you're doing is falling down the entire time, and you cannot possibly see how those baby steps would ever lead you toward the thing that you're dreaming of doing.
Mhm.
And then one day it's like you look behind you and you go, huh, I learned to walk and look where I am now.
Yeah. There's this great quote in a John Green novel of I fell in love with him like you fall asleep. slowly at first, but then all at once.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, and I love that quote because does how it feels when you start doing this, the progress. And like I took a couple of weeks off from playing the fiddle because I just had other things that were on my mind, and I was still teaching, but I hadn't really played, and I had a gig afterward, and I was like, oh man, I haven't really played in like 3 weeks, and it was obvious during this gig. I felt really rusty. But I was like, I have banjo fingers this whole time. And um and it was funny going back and starting to deep practice the violin again. It's just like it doesn't feel like there's any real growth out of that practice, but it's like you do that a little bit more every day. You come back to it and every couple of days, whatever, and you start to build that up. And just giving ourselves that idea of, oh, it's a drip and, into the bucket each time, but eventually the bucket
Right.
gets filled.
It it does. It's okay if it's really slow. In fact, it's probably better if it's really slow. And it sometimes I think that might also sometimes be the value of a teacher because they can help you see that it's progress even if you're feeling stuck or like it's really slow. Or that can
Hmm.
be the value of like having an experience outside of the one that you're usually in because you can sort of see from an outsider perspective that you are in fact making progress and moving in a direction and filling the
Hmm.
bucket.
Yep. It's great.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful. And I don't know. I think it's a beautiful time to be a part of this. And I think it's a really exciting time that heck, our whole relationship, like of our adult relationship, came from just a reaching out on Facebook Messenger, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and it went and it turned into something this cool and this fun. And I really like that there are folks like us that want to get together and make things. And I love that there are people who, whenever we put one of these out, log in and listen to
And
what we
want to
have to
listen.
say. And so I really appreciate that we're all keeping this little nerdy corner of the internet going. And I appreciate the community that we've been able to do this with. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you, listeners. Thank you for so much for listening to us today.
Yeah, and I hope that as a result of today, listening, you just do one little creative thing.
Yep. I don't care how you are creative. I care if you are creative.
And if you want to
And
tell us about it, we'd love to listen.
please, like, send us stuff. Like, post about it on your Instagram stories and tag us, and we'll be so happy to see it. It'll be great.
I would love that.
We love it
Yes.
too. But
Thank you
friends, thank
all.
you so much. And Erin, thank you so much for doing this at the end of your day over there in Scotland.
Oh, it's not the end. I'm going to a session later.
You dork. I love it. Well, thank
But
you
you're
for
welcome.
yeah, thank you for hanging out in the middle of your day then, I guess.
and and
All right.
thank you for hanging out at the beginning of your day.
Oh, yeah, I have 6 lessons today, so it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a great
You
day.
got this.
I got this. But audience, thank you so much. You're welcome to follow us on Instagram at Folk Music Educator, and you can look us up at other places that podcasts are sold. Not sold, but you get the idea. And we hope to see you next time that we do this. Always remember, always a student.
And always a teacher.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks.